Christina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I've been really looking forward to this interview, and I always love talking to athletes at your level because I'm always so curious what you're doing and tweaking in your training and nutrition to break through plateaus and continue to have a performance edge. So we'll get into that today, but maybe just give the audience your athletic background and kind of your journey to all of the great work you're doing today.
As a kid, I was a soccer player. I absolutely loved soccer. That was my one true focus. I didn't really get into any other sports. Soccer was my passion. It's what I wanted to do 24/7. So I grew up a soccer player all the way into high school and college. My first introduction to track was in junior high, and they have like a junior high track team. And I'm like, this is perfect. I can run track and then go straight to soccer practice afterwards. And I knew I was fast. I'm kind of starting in like fourth and fifth grade in PE. Whenever we had races, I was like, yes, because I loved racing the boys and beating the boys. That was kind of like my motivation all the time. I was super competitive as a kid, which always makes my parents laugh because they were both good athletes, but my mom isn't very ultra competitive. And so she was always confused when she got phone calls from the PE teacher in elementary school saying that I like passed out after the pacer test or whatever. She's like, "What is wrong with you? Why do you go so hard all the time?" And so my mom knew how ultra competitive I was at a young age, and it was just very self-driven from the beginning. And so I knew I was fast, and in soccer practice, my favorite part of soccer was always like the conditioning, which that should have been a kind of a warning sign to me that I was meant to be a runner, just because I loved the running aspect of soccer so much. And so, yeah, I did track in junior high and I was very successful. I broke the school records in like the 400, and I think one of them still stands today, which is pretty fun. So I knew I was pretty talented at a young age, but soccer was my passion. So I continued to pursue soccer through high school. And unfortunately, track and soccer are the same seasons. And so I had to pick between the two, and I chose soccer, which I'm glad that I did. I just loved it so much. And then went to college on a soccer scholarship. And while I was at college, the track coach would come to the soccer games. He was super supportive of the soccer team, and he noticed how fast I was. And soccer's in the fall in college, and then track is a winter and spring sport. And so he asked if I wanted to try track. And I said, well, I really liked it in middle school. So sure. And so he just kind of threw me in the 400 because I told him I ran the 400 in junior high. And I think I won the race out of like lane one or something, like in my first ever college meet. So he's like, okay, like I would love to give you a scholarship. And so that kind of fueled my love for track. And I did both sports through my junior year. I had to quit soccer my junior year because of concussions. So I had like, I think it was my fourth concussion. And the athletic trainer said, yeah, we should probably stop doing contact sports at this point. So I'm really grateful I had track to fall back on, just because I'm really competitive and wanted to keep competing. And so I was able to really focus on just track my junior and senior year. And I was able to, by the end of my fifth year senior, because I had an extra eligibility year just because of I was soccer my freshman year. I was a two-time All-American in NCAA Division two, in the 400-meter dash and then in the 4x4. So, and then after college, I kind of thought about trying to pursue professional running I was like a low 55-second 400 runner. And I knew I had potential to get down faster just because I hadn't been running track for very long, like only collegiately. But then kind of decided I was burnout and I needed a break. So I got married and had my kids, and it was the nice little break that I needed. And then that competitive fire kind of came back after I had my middle child, my daughter. I was like, like I love exercising, I love working out, but I think I want to run track again. And it just kind of came back, and I found the masters community and all these other amazing people that are continuing to be athletes at older ages. And so that kind of fueled my fire. My husband's been really supportive, and same with my kids. And I was able to kind of pick track back up again. And then I got pregnant with my son. And so I had to take a little break again, but continued to kind of train through that pregnancy. And yeah, and he was born in 2019, and I've been competing at a high level ever since he was born. So been awesome. Fun journey.
That is quite a journey, and I actually saw you talk to Cynthia on another podcast, and you were talking about your soccer journey, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool." She's also a soccer player, and they tend to be really good at track, like the 400 meter and the
Mhm.
800 meter, and it sounds like you just had this natural ability to run and to sprint, and you're just always so passionate about it. And now that you're older, I'm sure you've made a lot of changes within your training and nutrition. I think when we're young, we can get away with a lot of things and a lot of natural talent. And if you're good, you're good. But what are you doing now to compete at a high level, to chase medals and win meets? What have you changed the most? Let's start with nutrition.
That's been a big shift for me in college. I think I kinda started caring about nutrition maybe like my junior year when I started to really notice that I was talented in track, and I started to care, but it was all the wrong things. Like I thought I was doing really well by eating like Special K cereal in the morning and granola bars, like healthy granola bars, and stuff. And so my protein was really low, my fat was really low in college, and I started to have some issues with hypoglycemia. So I'd get really lightheaded during workouts, or loss of menstruation, or, what we call, it used to be the female athlete triad. Now we call it red S, which is relative energy deficiency syndrome. I had a lot of issues hormonally in college as well, just because I was trying to keep myself lean, but, still feed myself. I thought I was feeding myself the right foods, but really my iron was really low and my protein intake was really low and my fat intake was non existent. So now, as an older athlete, I've grown really wise. I care a lot about my performances, but my health is number one. And so I think with that perspective, I'm able to not think so much about like the aesthetics of being an athlete. It's more about, fueling myself properly to perform well instead of, like, oh, I just need to stay super lean. I've had a huge perspective shift on that. And so now my diet is completely different than it was in college. I am a very high protein, very high fat athlete. I do intake carbohydrate, which has really shifted probably in the last 6 months. I started to have some problems being really low carb. I was low carb for probably 6 years, probably extreme, like too low carb, and for me it just wasn't working anymore. It worked really well for a while and it fixed a lot of my health problems, but I've noticed that I needed to start incorporating fruit back in. I'm still grain free. I can't consume any breads or pastas or anything like that. So I just get my carbohydrate from fruit. And I'm thriving so well on that. Like within the last 6 months, I've noticed a lot of change and like just feeling better and not having skin problems and arthritis and things like that that I was like randomly kind of dealing with. But ever since I incorporated more red meat, I eat red meat every single day for almost every single meal. My health has been astronomically better than it was in college. I have way more muscle than I did in college, and I'm stronger than I was in college. Like I have a deadlift PR of 260, which is like double my body weight. And as a 400, 800 runner, like it's kind of a flex. My strength coach is like, super proud of that too. Just being like, I'm not a 100-meter sprinter and I can still deadlift a ton of weight, but a lot of that comes down to how I'm taking care of myself with the little things, with my diet, with my high iron, high protein intake, and then my sleep. Like I prioritize sleep a lot more than I used to as well.
That's super fascinating. I really hear a lot of that, like, a lot of women, they'll try, like, the super, like, ketogenic, and it'll heal them and be great for a while, and then they have to start to incorporate some, like, fruits like you do that they can tolerate back in and just kinda utilize the carbs strategically, and I think, like, when we were in college and younger, the messaging was, "No, you need to do carbs and sugars first," but then that was at the expense of our protein and fat being very down. So I'm sure
Mhm.
people were surprised when you said, yeah, like the Special K and all the granola bars wasn't as healthy as I thought. A lot of people would be shocked by that statement. But why weren't those things healthy for you and just doing all of that extra carb loading? Like did you see like gut distress, and you mentioned hormonal issues as well?
I think I was really low energy, which I think is due to the hormone problems. So I had red S, so my period would just kind of be all over the place. I would have it some months I wouldn't, and I couldn't figure it out. I was trying to eat as much as I could, and so I would just be eating, bagels and granola bars and bread and all these things to continue to pound like these carbohydrates to fix my cycle issues. And I wasn't seeing, and I feel like a lot of that, I had a lot of gut problems from that overload of grains and gluten, which I didn't realize I had an intolerance to at the time. I was just like, man, I'm just really bloated all the time and my stomach hurts. But I guess that's just, I just thought it was normal, this like that gut distress. And so I had a hard time eating a lot because of that gut distress. And so obviously my energy and calorie intake was really low from all this like overloading of fiber and bad grains and processed carbs and like all this stuff that I thought I was doing the right thing, but really I was super undernourished, and didn't know it at the time. And I would have hypoglycemic episodes too, where I would be training and then like through my reps, like I'd be like halfway through and I'm like super lightheaded, not able to finish my reps. And I just couldn't figure out what the problem was. Even through my senior year, like I was still like trying my best, but I was eating all lean meat, like turkey and chicken, and all these like processed granola bars and protein bars just to try to like get food in. Was trying to do the right thing. I was reading information from online and thought I was doing the best thing, but really now that I'm training at that same level and my diet is completely different, I was like, "Oh, if I would have just been eating like this then, like where would my success have taken me? I could have trained better, I could have recovered better, I would have been more prepared for my races. My cycle and my hormones would have been better off." Because now I have zero problems. I started to experience some issues with the low carb, but I'm glad that I figured that out and I'm handling fruit perfectly, beautifully. So I'm able to handle those carbohydrates again. And obviously, I know that I'm training really hard and I need them. And my hormones are telling me now that I need those things. But I'm still able to, like last night, I have a race today and I ate a big steak last night, a little bit of sweet potato on the side, and had some tart cherry juice last night. And I'll eat like that before every race, and I just feel fantastic. Like I don't need a big plate of pasta. I just need my big steak.
I love that, and yeah, it's just really going against everything that's mainstream and on Instagram and on TikTok and even plastered on, like, college weight room walls with the nutritional
Mhm.
guidelines. It's like, "Oh, you need to have your crackers and then your pretzels 2 hours before, and then a fig bar, and then a gel pack before a race," and it's like, "Says who?" Like, what
Mhm.
has been the studies behind this, and what's the history of these recommendations, which is a whole other podcast. But I
Yep.
just think it's really cool that you are no longer protein deficient, you're no longer fat deficient, which is a huge problem for our female athletes. So maybe you can get into what specifically like the high protein and the high fat and prioritizing those really helps with, and then also the benefits of red meat.
So the big benefits with in terms like the protein and the fat, females are extremely underfed. I'm seeing this as a high school coach. I am around female athletes all the time, and I truly think that most of them are trying to do the best that they can do. But like just like I was doing, I was eating granola bars and all this. If there was a bag of chips, of course I was going to eat it, or a bag of crackers, I was going to eat it, and just thinking like, oh, like I'm burning all this energy. Of course I need this stuff, which is true. Their metabolisms are burning, burning, burning. And so they just think like, okay, I'm just going to eat this, just keep eating, but they're eating the wrong things and they're still not getting the nutrients that they need. Like it's just wasted. It's like, okay, you're going to eat a bag of chips and you feel somewhat full, for an hour or 2 hours. You could have had, a big piece of chicken or a hamburger with an egg on top instead of that bag of chips. And then you're going to be getting all of those minerals and vitamins and iron that you needed. And instead, they're just not doing that and just grabbing the snacks and just snacking all day. And so I think, they're not looking at food as fuel, which is one big thing that I preach, is I think we've just gotten away from that. I think a lot of athletes, they're just, whatever tastes good, which there's a lot of things with, I mean, obviously we enjoy food, the taste of it is great, but we're getting away from how are we fueling ourselves with the proper fuel. I tell them all the time, if you have a really nice car that runs well, you wouldn't put crappy gasoline in it. Like you wouldn't just pour sugar water into your car. Like it's not going to work great. And so like you have to think of how are you feeling? How do you want to perform? It comes down to nutrition 98% of the time. Like they're not understanding why they're not putting on muscle, or they're not feeling great during their workouts or their performances, and it's just how are you fueling yourself? And so that protein, like I'm usually like 220 grams of protein a day, and I'm only 130 pounds. And so a lot of what I preach is at least 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is your minimum, for the and a bunch of the girls, my strength coach actually sat down with all our high school kids too and had them track this, and all of them are under their protein recommendations, like every single one of them. And I think a lot of it is they don't realize, like definitely these young athletes, like they're just completely unaware of, oh my gosh, I'm like way on protein. When I prioritize like that protein and that fat, too, like I can eat a lot of that in a meal and then I don't feel like I have to snack all day. Like honestly, I eat a really big meal at like 10:30, 11 o'clock. Like I'll have two hamburgers that are like higher fat, and then I'll put an egg on top. I cook them in butter, salt them, put an avocado on top, and like have a fruit as a side. And that sustains me like almost all the way. I usually have like another big protein shake or something like that in the afternoon. And then my dinner is like prioritized protein and then like fruit juice or fruit on the side. And it's amazing, like, and I need to be better about tracking. I used to track, but now I just kind of go off of intuition, and I know when I'm not feeling right. Like, okay, something is off. Like I didn't get enough fat today. My hormones are off. I'm not feeling good. But it's amazing how I don't have to be constantly snacking because I'm prioritizing, like, okay, like protein is the priority here. And then fat is definitely still a priority. I make sure my protein is generally high fat, and then I'm still like, now I'm adding in those carbohydrates from the form of fruit. And I eat my protein and my fat first. And then I kind of fill in the gaps with fruit. And then my body kind of tells me, like, okay, you've had enough. So
So as far as, like, the amount of carbs you're eating now and fruit, how is it different in grams compared to what you were doing when you were, like, low carb?
So I was pretty much pure carnivore
Mhm.
for probably 4 years, and so my carb intake was, like, non-existent.
Okay.
I still consume dairy, like whole milk, and so you get some carbohydrate from that. So I was incorporating that, like, into, like, scrambled eggs or, like, a protein shake, and so I would still have whole milk, and I was doing, like, raw dairy. I do goat's milk now because I was kinda having some issues with, like, the casein. So I do goat milk, which is really like high fat and still has some carb in it. So I would say I was like 20 grams of carbs or under
That's
for
low. Yeah.
for 4 years. So
Yeah.
low. And it fixed my gut issues, which I were coming from gluten. And so I thought it was kind of coming from all carbs. I had kind of this fear of like fruit and carbohydrate because I thought it was causing a lot of my issues, like my gut issues. And then I finally was like, I started to see some problems. I would say it was about 5 months ago. I was having arthritis in my knees.
Mhm.
I was having psoriasis kinda pop up, like, on my hairline here,
Mhm.
and my HRV on my Whoop was really low, so it
Mhm.
was, like, 35 or something like that. I'm like, "I just slept 9 hours. How is my HRV so low?" And so luckily, my coaches kind of said, they kind of pushed me into like, "Hey, like, have you tried incorporating like some sort of carbohydrate back in?" I'm like, "You know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do organic fruit." And it's tough because like if you've ever seen like the carnivore community, it's very
Mhm.
like tight knit and like, hey, you can do this, like you can survive
Mhm.
off carnivore. And
Yeah.
so I believed it, I was like, I know it works really well for some people. I just for me,
Mhm.
it wasn't working anymore. And so I
Mhm.
finally kind of faced that and started eating fruit again. And mentally, I'm way happier because I feel like I get a little bit of that sweetness, and I don't feel like I need to go gorge myself on ice cream or whatever. It's like I'm happy with fruit, and I my HRV shot way up. Now it's like at 50 every morning when I wake up, which is way different. And I feel better. The psoriasis went away. My arthritis went away completely. I think my thyroid, and I don't know because I didn't get a lot of testing done, but I think hormonally something was going on with the really low carb for a long time. Like, I think it's great as a healing mechanism, and I'm not a doctor, but I think long term there's issues definitely with women. I think there can
Mhm.
be.
Yeah, especially women athletes too, and you're right, I think people can maybe try it as a strategy to add foods back in and see what they were reacting to, so as an
Yeah.
elimination plan, kinda like you did, and figure out now, like, the fruits that you're thriving on and potatoes as well, I started to do that too, and yeah, it's just nice, but so how many grams of carbs now within fruit would you say? Because
Oh, sorry.
you
Yeah,
were
you asked that.
yeah.
I'm about like 200
Okay.
usually a day. It's kind of a sweet spot, and I don't know, I don't feel like I have to, like, eat much more than that.
Mhm,
It's like I feel very, like, satisfied with that amount, like, I'm not hungry, I'm not, feeling like, "Man, I'm missing out on something," which with carnivore, definitely when I was going through some of those health problems and I was trying to figure out what was causing it, I was feeling deprived in a
mhm,
way. And I have so much willpower that I'm like, "Oh, I'm just gonna push through it, like, you're not deprived, you're fine." But really, I was feeling, like, mentally, I'm like, "Man, I just feel like I can't eat anything." Like, I can't just have, like, an apple, you know? Like, it's like, how is a whole food that, God created and put on this earth, how is that harming me? And so I kinda struggled with that for a bit, and as soon as I incorporated it back in, no side effects at all. Like, I feel 100% better. My weight room performance is much better. I'm sleeping better, and my HRV is telling me, obviously, like, I'm recovering a lot better too. My resting heart rate went down, everything. And so, obviously, something was going on in my body. I think it's too with how much I train. I think it can work for people that maybe aren't as active, but with how hard I'm training and pushing my body, it just needed some assistance. And now I'm seeing, okay, like, carbs are not bad. Like, I think processed carbs are bad. But
yeah.
in terms of like fruit and going like that whole fruit route, like, I'm definitely thriving with putting it back in. So, which makes me very happy because I enjoy fruit a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, and I think with, like, the demands of your sport, more of, like, the speed and glycolytic and endurance-based athletes, they should consider nature's carbs, like, you should not be full keto. I think you have a lot of,
Mhm.
like, ultra marathon runners saying, "Yeah, keto works for athletes," but I'm like, "You're an ultra marathoner, like, you can burn fat for energy and,
Right.
like, be okay."
Tapping into that.
Some people run marathons fasted. I'm like, "Okay, but, like, you're a marathon runner, like, you're not, like, a
Mhm.
power and glycolytic sport." But I think that's
Mhm.
cool, and the 200 grams of fruits, it's still, like, a moderate amount of carbs, but it's still
Mhm.
significantly lower than the current recommendations. Even for
Oh, yeah.
our young female athletes are being recommended, "Oh, you need 300 grams to 400 grams of carbs a day," and they're just saying any carbs, like crackers, Rice Krispies, pretzels, fig bars, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, 300 to 400 is a lot, and athletes can thrive off of way less than that and still be great." So, I just find it so interesting that's the recommendation, and worse yet, a lot of these dietitians don't even eat that way themselves.
Yeah.
It should be criminal to recommend something like that you are not even doing yourself, and a lot of them are still athletes and training hard, and they're not even having 400 grams of carbs a day and snacking and doing the gel packs and doing the pretzels, and it's just very suspect to me.
Yeah, and it's all just this inflammatory junk
Mhm,
is what it is. I mean, the fact of like, and then because I look at fruit, for example, and it's a whole food. and the body can process it. Like, obviously, there's an insulin response and stuff like that, but I'm no longer afraid of those things. But if I tried to get even 200 grams of carbs in through pretzels and crackers, and I'm gonna feel way different. I'm gonna feel like junk. Like, we have all this inflammation. And I think it's collecting in their joints and causing injury issues. And as I know for a fact, like, if I add any of that stuff back in, or if I try to eat, chips or something like that, which usually I don't ever go off the rails, but it's like if I try to incorporate something that I feel the inflammation. Like, I feel like I get headaches, I don't feel right, I feel sluggish, I get bloated. Like, there's definitely inflammation responses, and I just think a lot of athletes are just so unaware, like I was in college. I'm like, I just thought the bloating was normal, you know? Like, you just don't realize when you don't know what it feels like to feel 100% good, you don't know the difference. And so I think now when I cleaned everything out, and that's why the carnivore and keto diet was so good for me in the beginning, because I felt what it's like to feel normal, like cleaning out a lot of that processed crap. And then, when I add it back in, I'm like, okay, I can tell that that food does not sit well with me and I have inflammation from it. And so I just know my body well enough that I know if I eat something wrong, like, I know that it's not right. Like, something's not right about the way my body reacted to it. And I think there's so many athletes that are not in tune with that, and they just trust all these recommendations. Like, "Oh, okay, I just have to get carbohydrates in," so they just pound the carbs no matter the source, and they're not looking at it from a whole foods approach, which is when I talk to other athletes, that's what I always recommend. Like, just go to a single source, go to a whole food. And some of it you might not do well with. Like, I cannot eat, like, most vegetables I can't eat. Like, I just don't do well, like, with vegetables for some reason. I can handle potatoes and, fruit, obviously, but, like, veggies, like, I just like bell peppers and tomatoes, get extreme heartburn. I don't feel like, I immediately don't feel good. And so I'm like, "Okay, I'm not gonna eat those things because I know the way it makes me feel. It's not worth it to me." But I just think these athletes, they don't realize, like, their body isn't telling them, or they don't know what it feels like to feel really good, unfortunately, which is sad.
Have you been finding with a lot of, like, younger girl athletes, they're following some of these plans, like, perfectly. They're having, like, all their vegetables and crackers and pretzels and lean chicken breast, and they're not getting results because I've seen that time and time again with my girls that they think they're doing well and being healthy, but it's actually ruining their performance, causing skin issues and acne, causing autoimmunity, painful periods, and PMS symptoms. So I don't know if that's something you found with some of your girls.
Oh, yeah, I've had a couple girls that, they're high performers, and with a lot of in the track world, 'cause I'm around soccer players a little more now because my daughter's a soccer player, but she's still really young, so, you know, it's not nutrition isn't really a focus for them, they just eat whatever mom and dad gives them. But with my track athletes, a lot of track athletes are very type A, and so, definitely like your distance runner, middle distance runner types, like they're very, very regimented and strict on a lot of things they do. And so it's easy for them to kind of fall into a trap of, okay, like my diet is very regimented, which then can like lead to some sort of ED as well. And they don't really realize they're in it until they're in it. And they're like, okay, I lost my period. I think something's going on. And luckily, I've been able to talk to a couple of my athletes that have been down this road, and they just are not eating enough, and what they're eating is those pretzels and those vegetables, and like, well, I'm eating vegetables and eating all these things. I'm like, I understand that there's vitamins and minerals in the vegetables, but where's our protein at? And the ones that I've seen kind of fall off of this is it's the same thing with every single one of them. Their fat is way too low and their protein is way too low. And that's what's been the standard across the board with many of my athletes that are seen. They might have really good performance at first because they're talented and they're lean and they have really good performances for 6 months to a year, and then you start to see issues after that. Definitely if their period has been absent. And so after about a year, I think their body is starting to break down now. It's like it was functioning on survival mode for a year. And then now we're seeing stress fractures. Now we're seeing really low energy. And so they don't have, like, at the end of a race, they can't kick or something like that. And I've just recently had an athlete that read the book Roar. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's like Stacy Sims. But she talks a lot about kind of that red S or that relative energy deficiency syndrome and girls with low iron. And so, with one of my athletes in particular, I'm like, we got to get the main goal is if you need to start tracking your protein, you start tracking your fat, and you're not going to be afraid of red meat, and you're going to eat it. And you're going to eat your eggs, and so she made that major shift and gained like 6 to 8 pounds, I think, and at first, like, that kinda freaked her out, like, gaining that weight, and I told her, I'm like, "Do not be afraid of gaining weight, is when your body's happy hormonally and strong, like, your performances are going to come," and her performances just skyrocketed, she gained muscle, she's happier, she's seeing I've just seen a major shift and change in her just by getting, where she's like, I just made myself eat. I made myself eat steak. I made myself eat hamburger, even if I didn't think I was hungry because of the amount of mileage she was getting in. So I think they think they're doing the right thing by eating, but they're eating this diet culture diet instead of fueling themselves for performance.
Gosh, that red meat recommendation is so important for our girls. It is like the OG superfood. It's like the multivitamin you've always needed. And I always encourage my girls, like, have that first. And like you said, they find that they're satiated longer, they have a burst of energy, they're feeling strong, they're finally putting on muscle mass and getting a body composition that's robust. And I just kind of want you to speak to, like, what has eating red meat daily done for your performance, and just go over just some of the vitamins and minerals and amino acids that it contains.
Oh man, I've seen a huge shift. So I kind of forgot to say this, but right after college, I kind of went through like a vegan stint for it did not last long. It lasted like 6 months maybe. But I just kind of believed, like I saw the Forks Over Knives documentary, I think. And because I've always been so interested in nutrition, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try this. And I wish I could find a picture. I was very skinny, I was lean, but I had, like, no muscle definition, and I was running, like, marathons, half marathons at the time. It was, like, right after college, and I was suffering, like, I had no energy, I felt terrible, and then now, just the major shift in incorporating red meat, because even in college, I didn't eat a lot of red meat. I went chicken, I went tuna, everything lean, 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 like, I was just believing that that was the best thing for me. So now, like, if even pictures of me from college to now, I have so much more muscle definition, and the only change has been red meat. Like, there's otherwise, I was exercising then, I was training then, I was weightlifting, sprinting, all the things, and then the same thing as I'm doing now, except for now I'm almost 40, and I have more muscle definition than I have ever had, and the only shift has been red meat. That's the only change, the only difference. Besides maybe getting some of the junk processed carbohydrates out, but I just put on muscle just by red meat because I'm not in there, like, my strength coach doesn't put me through bodybuilding routines or anything like that. I lift twice a week and I do, I lift heavy. I just have a lot of muscle definition, because I'll have so many people ask me, like, man, you must lift 5 times a week and be in the gym forever, to have a six pack and have, muscle definition like you have. I'm like, "No, I'm in the weight room 2 times a week. I don't do any bodybuilding. Like, I deadlift, I front squat, and he has me do pull-ups and push-ups." Like, it's very basic athletic lifting, and that has been the biggest thing with red meat that I have noticed is just the muscle that I've put on, and I haven't done anything else. It's just red meat incorporation. Another big difference has been my recovery, and so I can hammer out a really hard workout, and then, like, my coach usually has me do speed work on, like, a Monday, and then Tuesday, I turn around and have my main workout, which is, like, 800, 400 stuff, which is very difficult, highly, like, lactic. type workouts, and I can recover very quick from those things at my age and still get a lift in on that Tuesday and then still feel very recovered by like Thursday. It's always that I prioritize red meat. You know, it's my main, like my 2 big meals a day are both red meat based. So I eat chicken maybe once a week, which I like chicken. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just missing a lot of those, like, it's missing that fat and more of those like vitamins and minerals that I think you can only get from red meat. It's just, yeah, it's a superfood. It has everything you need. And that's why I
Mhm.
literally survived off of red meat alone for like 3 years,
Right.
essentially. I still had a lot the same muscle definition. Adding the carbs back in hasn't changed my muscle at all.
Right.
It was just more performance based is why I incorporated the carbs back in, is I feel much better in terms of the energy and stuff like that. But the red meat has been the main factor. I mean, I was competing as an athlete on red meat alone for
Mhm.
2, 3 years, and I was performing great. So, it's amazing what it can do.
It really is, and it seems like such a basic fix, but people still fear it because there's just that lack of education on what vitamins and
Mm,
minerals and healthy fats are within it, and then even, like, the creatine content, that's probably why you were putting on so much muscle and having, like, very powerful and heavy workouts. It's just such a great food to add, and I just see too much in, like, the mainstream recommendations. It's like, "Oh, have red meat, like, once a week," and I'm like, "No, you need to move that to, like,
mm.
6, 7 days a week,
I
multiple
can't
times a
believe
day."
it's so frustrating to me that they're still pushing that. I'm like,
Yeah,
it's like there's so much research, like, proving there's so many in ones too now with all these people that are have figured it out. I feel like there has been a big shift compared to
yeah,
like back, early 2000s when low fat was a very big push. I do feel like there has been a dietary shift of a lot more people not fearing red meat and eating eggs and being like, okay, I feel a lot better and I'm not dying of heart disease. So obviously there's something wrong in the research. It's sad that they're still pushing that, but I also believe we're living in a day and age where they're trying to profit off of sick people. And if you have a lot of people eating properly, you're not going to have a lot of sick people. So I'm like, it might sound a little rabbit hole-ish, but I unfortunately believe that there's a lot of powerful people that don't want the right nutritional message to get out there. But I do feel like there are some good doctors that are really
mhm,
pushing, hey, red meat is not harming us. It's completely healthy red meat and eggs. And I just tell people, I'm like, I'm an N1 right here. I've been eating heavy red meat and heavy egg and heavy cholesterol diet for 6 years.
mhm,
And, like, do I look like I'm dying of cardiovascular disease? Like, I'm a high
yeah,
performing athlete at 36 years old. Like, I'm obviously thriving.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's just unfortunate, but, it's podcasts like this that get the message out there. And, I mean, thank goodness for the internet in that regard because I feel like the right message is being pushed by people that care and that are experiencing it and living it. It's just we're a little behind, I feel like, on the athletic side. I feel like, more just your regular Joes are kind of, that maybe have had some medical or health problems are finding out like red meat heals. But I think on the athletic side, we're a little bit slower.
mhm,
Like, that change is harder, I think, for people. It's like literally taking a big cruise ship and turning it around the other direction. Like, people are afraid to try something new. They're like, "Well, every other athlete is doing this, all the universities are pushing this."
right.
So I'm gonna be like this too, I don't wanna do something different and change it, and then, they're afraid of what's gonna happen.
Yeah, it is definitely a constant battle with the current guidelines and the constant, like, carb loading and snacking and processed carbs and all that, and just the fear of red meat and having, like, your eggs and healthy fats for our young girls. They really tend to fear fats a lot, but I think it's so
Mm,
cool. I mean, you're almost in your 40s and you're thriving and you're running probably faster than you were in your 20s and maybe faster than some teenage girls out there, which shouldn't be happening, right? Like,
mhm,
it just you're,
yep.
like, defying all the laws of aging, and I timed my speed the other day, and I was like, "I'm running faster than, like, over 99% of my athletes. Like, I'm 35. This shouldn't be
Mhm.
happening, people. And it's like you, it was the introduction of the daily red meat and having whole foods and single ingredient foods and strategic nature's carbs and just like going against the mainstream. So I think that's just the message here is just go against the crowd. Christina, this was a great episode. Do you have any final words for our female athlete listeners?
Aw, I would just encourage you to keep pushing, keep just searching for the truth, and don't be afraid to reach out to people
Mhm.
for that help. Because I think a lot of our, I work with female athletes every single day, and I think a lot of it is, well, I was afraid to ask, or I'm too embarrassed that I'm struggling with my period, or I don't understand it. I think that dogma needs to go away. We need to be, as powerful women and strong women, we need to build a community and reach out to other women that have been there before us. I know I wish I would have had someone, in their 30s or 40s that was still an athlete to be able to ask questions to when I was young, because I didn't really know what I was doing. I was trying, but I wanted to do the right thing. I just didn't know who to reach out to, or I was scared to. And don't be afraid to, because that's what we're here for. And we've been in your shoes. We've been young and we've been trying to pursue athletics. And, if truly with age, like we've just gained wisdom by I've made the wrong choices, and then I've had people that have taught me the right way, or I've just kind of figured out what works and just through age and experience. And so I'm not being afraid to reach out to other women and try to get help in terms of nutrition, or am I overtraining, and just those kind of questions, and not being ashamed of it.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you for this conversation. And everyone, we hope you enjoyed this episode. I will see you next time.